The concept, notion of the devil or evil is a conflictory mind. The notion of God is a mind at rest, a mind that is settled in what it thinks it knows. And so this is why in religion it is highly advised that we have a high level of repetition, constantly reading the scriptures, constantly reminding ourselves of the right things to do and steering away from the wrong things to do. Now, the more we get immersed into the natural world, the more at home we become. And so you all know that when you sit in your garden, you're chilling out with a glass of wine or beer, then you can start to feel most pleasant. Why? Well, it's not just the stimulation of the alcohol and the peace around you of the garden, but it's the realization that being still is one of the most pleasing things that we can do and be in life. But we've been conditioned so much not to be still. We've been told for all of our lives that we need to be busy, we need to achieve, we need to be go-getters, and being lazy is the realm of the devil. When in actual fact it's the opposite, isn't it? So who's been telling us that being lazy or sedentary is the realm of the devil? The devil's been telling you that. And so who's the devil? Well, the state or the education system. Those people that are manipulating us and wanting to enslave us and extract our energy. The last thing they want is to feel pleasant inside and to be relaxed, because every minute or hour we are relaxed and we are still, we are not being productive. And so when we start to look at the world like this, we can see that the world is governed by evil because it wants us to be busybodies all the time, when the reality is that if we want to be closer to the essence of our true selves, then we want to be as still as we possibly can be. And then when we are still, eventually we'll slip into meditation, and then when we are in the deepest of meditations, we'll realize that we are the all that there is. We are cosmic consciousness. And so that's when you become closer to God. That notion of God, which you are part of. Everything else is distraction. And so some of you will be aware that the Buddhist philosophy is basically just what I've said. It's all about doing very little, being as sedentary as you possibly can, and spending an enormous amount of time by stilling the mind and resting the body. And from that we have the greatest levels of insight. We get little insight when we are super busy and super confused, and we are absorbing a whole myriad of conflictory information. Because as I spoke about in previous videos, we can never be sure which information is true, which information is correct, and which information we should have the greatest of adherence to. And so also when we look at so-called knowledge, we have to realise that the vast majority of it is superfluous. It's superfluous to us enjoying life. And so, if you can imagine a life where you have a vocation which isn't too mentally stressful or taxing, maybe, for instance, like, the only job that I would ever consider doing would be something like a park ranger, where I would be a ranger in a beautiful natural park, like the parks I visit. then if I'm just casually going about my business, just checking on this and checking on that and, you know, what have you, then I would think that I would be in the best possible position to enjoy life, because I'll be out in the natural environment, I wouldn't be stressed, I would be doing something that I thoroughly enjoy doing, and so I wouldn't find it taxing or stressful, and I would get some sort of job satisfaction from it, of course, because I'm out in the elements. So what could be a perfect job for me other than something like that? Anything else out of that, like jobs I have actually created for myself in the past, whereby I was a go-getter and I was highly intent on the acquisition of money, which of course meant power, well, I was never happy when I was doing that. For the vast majority of the time. There was a small period of time when I was very, very happy, when I was completely emancipated, but very quickly you get embroiled back into bureaucracy and rules and regulations, and you're governed and stifled, and it just gets a whole can of worms, and dealing with all that sort of stuff takes away any pleasure that you would have. And for instance, I'm speaking when I was property developing in Bulgaria, before they were in the European Union. When they weren't in the European Union, you could buy a property with a bag of money on a table, you sign a contract within half an hour, and then the property's yours, and you do with it whatever you want to. Now, of course, it's all changed. But when we look at these notions of heaven and hell, we can see that it's very clear to see, it's very obvious for those of us that are just a little bit contemplative, because we would realise that when we are the most happy, then we are at the least encumbered. Because being encumbered, being under pressure, being stressed, being coerced and forced to do things that we don't really want to do, isn't fertile ground for happiness. And so, for those of you that are trying to be happy and wonder how you're going to do it, well, you just look at your life and you go, well, look, if I am ambitious, then I am always going to be dwelling in the devil's territory, because I am going to be dwelling in a realm with other ambitious people. It's going to be vicious, exceedingly competitive, and engage an enormous amount of stress. That's the nature of the beast. And if you think, yeah, well, I want to get nice this and nice that and big this and big that, well, therefore you sell your soul to the devil then, don't you? If, however, your ego doesn't want big this and big that and great this and great that, if it just can find the beauty in tranquility and the availability of just being able to walk out into the countryside whenever you want to, and to go to sleep whenever you want to, and do anything pleasurable whenever you want to, then you are closer to heaven, aren't you? And so it really is a no-brainer. The difficulty arises, people, that most people feel as if they're forced into labour. Well, you know, I'm a classic example of exhibiting that we are not forced into labour, we do have a choice. And I've chosen not to engage in labour for 14 years. And so I would say to you that you don't have to do what you are doing. You have chosen to do that because you've sold your soul to the devil, because you want this new this and you want this new that, and you want to try to gather up your nest egg, which is a fiction and a fantasy in its own right, because if you're paying into any pensions and you're gathering up all these assets, well, the bottom invariably just falls out of these things, like it has done a myriad times in the past. And so I wouldn't count on that too much if I were you. I'd count on having your treasures now, instead of projecting them into the future, you think you're storing them all up for this one day when you're going to be free and you're going to be fit and healthy to enjoy those things. Well, invariably, if people are working to 65 or 70 years old, then we're no longer free, are we? We are, we're going to be ill, we're going to be constrained. There's going to be many things that we can't actually do. And so we continue along those lines with the dream that we are going to be achieving something which we could have now, only we could have it much better now. We could have it while we're young and while we're strong and while we appreciate being free. So it just depends what you're willing to accept. If you want to relinquish the big cars and the big house and the big holidays, and if you are prepared to have a smaller house, a smaller car or no car, and every day is a holiday, then you can see that there's a great difference between those ways of life. And so, what I've been doing for the past 14 years is exactly what I've wanted to do every single hour of every single day. And in comparison to how my life was when I was caught up in the matrix, and I considered that money equals power and power is important, well, I came to the conclusion quite rapidly, really, that was all Maya, and all what was happening is my life was being stolen away, and I wasn't living the sort of life that I envisioned I would, having that money. The more money I got, the more stress I embodied, and the more I needed to run away from my responsibilities. And so it got to one point when I was running my business that I would have to go on holiday for 1 week out of every month, and it was kind of like a standing joke, really, with the people that I was employing. I employed 20 people, and where's Aaron? Oh, he's here, or he's there, or he's somewhere else. It's kind of like, well, fucking hell, why is he going on all these holidays? He needed all these holidays. He needed to get away from the monster that he created. And fortunately, he was able to do that because he created something which pretty well ticked over and ran without him being there, at least for a week or two. And so when I was walking on these completely abandoned beaches in the middle of nowhere, or the mountains, or in tropical rainforests and everything like that, I looked at myself and I went, this is who I am. This is the person I want to be. What changes do I have to make to bring it about? Stop doing all the rest of the stuff. And then I'd say to myself, yeah, well, it's by the virtue of you earning money that you can spend all this money to be in places like this. And I said to myself, well, if that is true from a world travel perspective, but I could go back to my home country, or any country, and live very humbly within the one vicinity. If I chose a beautiful environment, then I could live like that. And if I had peace of mind, and if I wasn't so ambitious that I needed to climb every mountain and, rampage around the world, once I'd got that out of my system, like it is now, then I walk up this path most every day and look at it. It's empty. And it's green all around. And it's pretty peaceful. And so, well, that gives rise to my mind being peaceful. And I'm thinking, well, okay, it's not the most beautiful place in the world, and it is quite close to a city, but it's got all the perks of the city. The doctors, the dentists, the supermarket, and all the rest of it. And so there's certain compromises and sacrifices we make, and we fall into the best possible version of our own utopia. And so what I'm saying then, in a nutshell, is that don't make things too complicated, because really it's not that complicated. All you've got to do is to look at what's the minimum you'll settle for. And if you will settle for the bare essentials, then your life is going to be pretty simple. If you want a little more, then you're going to need some money come from somewhere, and you've got to make this manifest. Now, there are ways to make this manifest without putting any hard labour into it. Of course, it takes time. You've got to play certain games. But when you've played the games, then you're in a certain position whereby you can continue pretty infinitely. And so this is where I'm at now. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've got this utopia, but I keep spoiling it by delving into the things about the world that cause the agitation. So why do I want to keep doing that? What sort of level of intrigue is it that does that? That keeps wanting to take me out of the bliss into the conflict? Is it because I thrive on conflict? Is it because there's something which is deeply nurturing about the conflict? Why is it that we need conflict? Is it because we've become so used to it that it's some sort of a, it's an aphrodisiac? Does it turn us on? Does it keep us vital? Does it keep us in the fight and flight? Do we need this cortisol pumping through to make us feel alive? Well, we don't. We can feel very, very alive just by immersing ourselves within the natural world. And albeit I've done this for a lot of years, being a dichotomous person, being a Libra, then I always tend to end up throwing a spanner in my own works, because I feel the need to experience all things in life, not just one. And so, albeit I'm not working, I've not got all that other stress, I tend to want to watch things which may upset my apple cart a little bit, which may taint my rose-tinted glasses when I look at the sham of the human race, and how it's going to the dogs, and how on some level I say I don't care, but how on another level I evidently do. And so therefore there's a conflict. Who's bringing about that conflict? I'm bringing about the conflict by watching it. Why do I want to bring myself into that conflict again? Maybe so I can emancipate myself from it. Maybe so I can taste it. I can feel it. I can feel it pumping through my veins. And I can say to myself, okay, enough now. And I'm going to have a rest. Maybe that's how it is. Maybe it's always going to be that way. Who knows? But when we look closely at what we are and ask questions, then slowly we'll start to get some of the answers which pertain to us, as to what we really want, how we really feel. What's the best possible state that we've ever been in? Do we want to remain in that state forever? Or do we want to spot it from time to time because it's more exciting? It's a funny thing being a human being.